Good morning, H-Town. Time to go to work.
So delighted to be joined again this year to talk some draft for the Texans by Austin Gayle from Pro Football Focus. Austin, for people that aren't familiar, can you give us a top-line view of your evaluation and how the analytics work, kicking out a grade for these prospects?
Yeah, absolutely. Working in this draft class, I definitely feel low on it, right, compared to previous years. I don't think there is high-end quarterback talent in this class like last year. I also think that none of the receivers, I'm not taking any of them ahead of Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith as prospects last year. I think where there is blue chip talent is offensive tackle and edge. Beyond that, I think there's really good depth at receiver. There's some good depth at off-ball linebacker, interior offensive line. Offensive line, I think there's some good pieces, but it's a lack of blue chip talent that I do think is driving like the high end of this class down. Last year you think about Micah Parsons, Patrick Surtain, the 5 quarterbacks that went in the first round, the three high end receivers. There was a lot of legitimate JC Horn, like high end talent that people really coveted. And this year, I think there are a lot of players that would go behind those players if they were in the same class.
Yeah, and how do you when you guys are working out a grade, and how possible is it to take into account kind of scheme fit and all these kind of stuff? Where you get a different grade if you're being in zone or press man coverage, for example, in a secondary player. How possible is that, and how does all the kind of data points make it universal for teams and kind of fans alike to understand a prospect?
Yeah, I think what's great about a lot of the more predictive prospect data is, measurables, athletic testing, a lot of this production figures that PFF has. None of these quarterbacks are overwhelmingly accurate, maybe outside of Kenny Pickett. Even Kenny Pickett isn't in that tier of Burrow, Murray, Mayfield that have been there in the past. And you look at Malik Willis as a lot of tools, but not super accurate with the football. High pressure to sack conversion rate or sack to pressure conversion rate. You have Desmond Ridder is very similar from an accuracy perspective. Sam Howell very similar in RPO offenses too. Sam Howell, 46% of his offensive snaps are RPOs. Like no offense in the NFL is going to do that. So there's a lot of projectable data, both from a measurables and athleticism perspective, and then even in production, true pass rush win rate, pass blocking sets, all that stuff, where there just isn't obvious blue chip talent. Like there just isn't. And I think just because it's a down year doesn't mean I think you can't get starters. I don't think we'll be looking back at this class saying, oh, wow, like a litany of Hall of Fame talent, a litany of all pro talent. It's why I think, there's going to be a lot of trade down opportunities and people not necessarily interested in prioritizing this year's classes that much are next year. You saw that with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Trading away a first round pick to pick up a first and a second in future draft.
Yeah, and in terms of the kind of outlook for the next couple of classes, do you feel that this class is maybe somewhere in the realms of like kind of 2019 level of quality, where there's there is a number of players at the top 2 or 3, and then they kind of pretty much between about 20th and 60th, there isn't much in it in terms of value across the board?
No, I think that's a good comparison for sure. I think that it's very similar in that, the player that goes at 10 is not going to be all that dissimilar to the player that goes at 20 or 25. And that's why I think day 2 in this class is where a lot of people are going to have value, right? There's starting safeties that'll be available in day 2. They're starting off-ball linebackers, starting interior offensive linemen and all that stuff that I think there's legitimate projectable starters, maybe not, again, these blue chip talents, but guys that I think can legitimately enter the NFL and have some success.
So from a Texans point of view, Austin, sitting with the 3rd overall and 13th overall, assuming they don't trade out, which I think teams will want to, but you've got to have a partner to do that, and if the quality's not there, it'll be tough unless you can kick it into further years. But would you see any ideal fits and picks at those top 2 spots?
Yeah, for number 3 overall, I think the biggest thing is offensive tackle. I think they should lock into an offensive tackle or a top flight edge defender there. I think it's a premium position, and there are some really good players at those spots, right? It could be Aiden Hutchinson if he falls that far, Kayvon Thibodeau, Trayvon Walker. I think all 3 of those guys are worthwhile selections at number 3 overall. And then you look at the offensive tackle class, I'd put Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, and Charles Cross top of my list at number 3 overall. I don't think I'm looking at Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame. I'm not looking at Ahmad Gardner or Derek Stingley at number 3. I think really you should hone in on offensive tackle or edge if they do stay put. Right now, there's opportunity for them to trade back. If teams are looking to go up and grab a quarterback, who knows? But if they stay put at 3, I think it should be offensive tackle or edge. And then at 13, that's where I think they can be more versatile with what they do. I think my least favorite decision at 13 is off-ball linebacker. I think I would much rather prioritize wide receiver there at that spot, cornerback, or even pass rusher if they don't go pass rusher at 3. Say it's Evan Neal at 3, George Karlaftis at 13, or Ike Ekwonu at 3, maybe even Jordan Davis at 13. I think going in the trenches with both those picks is probably my dream scenario for the Texans.
Yeah, and you mentioned it there in terms of like falling stock, falling up and down. Obviously, you guys take a grade over a number of seasons, and particularly Sam Howell's one guy that I noticed that's rated higher than a lot of guys would necessarily have them on consensus. I'm assuming that's because it's over a number of years. But when you guys have kind of got a fixed number, that an analytical output from a number of touch points across a number of years in college, how do you kind of use that as a backdrop versus the kind of rhetoric in the media of guys are falling, guys are dropping, Tavon Walker's jump up the board, is the phrase used, but is that necessarily representative of what teams think?
I don't think so. I think risers and fallers is very much like a media-driven narrative, right? I think it's media catching up on players, right? I think a lot of the league knew how athletic Tavon Walker was before his combine, right? I think a lot of people talking to Georgia Georgia coaches and all that stuff. I think it's similar, any player that oftentimes you're catching up to from an athleticism standpoint, teams are well aware of through the resources they have with the college programs, et cetera. So like I said, I really do think that teams are not as volatile with their board, right? Walker's not rising for the Lions as much as he is for a lot of other people, a lot of other media in this class.
And in terms of this class, Austin, who are your guys? Who are the kind of guys you might be underrated, might be less talked about, sleepers, is the kind of phrases used. But have you got a couple of guys that, if you were in a war room, you'd pound the table for to come in the building?
I think Charles Cross, in terms of like high profile guys, I think Charles Cross is getting pretty underrated in this class. I'm a huge George Karlaftis fan as well. Chris Olave is one of my guys. Sky Moore. Those are all guys that I think ultimately do go in the top 50 picks. But some sleepers that I like Keontae Ingram, the running back out of USC. I think he's a day 3 player I'd like to invest in. I like also Bo Melton, the wide receiver out of Rutgers, who's a former 4-star recruit that declined to go play at Michigan to go play at Rutgers because he's a Jersey kid and wanted to stay in Jersey. So I think there's a lot of really good talent from that player that maybe didn't play at a high profile school. So Ingram's one, Bo Melton's another. I really like Bully Ball McCall, Marquand McCall, the defensive tackle out of Kentucky. Struggled with a bit of weight concerns and couldn't really see the field. But if he can really hone it all in, I think he's got the demeanor, right, to play really well in the NFL. So there are some like day 3 guys that it's like, I like that trait, or I like that specific school skill set that he has. Maybe he's not a perfect player or even a starter out of the gate, but guys that I really like coming on.
And you're a San Diego State guy, is that right?
I'm a big San Diego State guy. That's right. Graduated from San Diego State in May of 2017.
So is this going to be the record year for San Diego State, guys? I did a film breakdown of Cam Thomas, so I'll send you that after this. But you got Ariza, the punter, or you got the tailback in there as well. A number of prospects, Dunkel as well in there. A number of guys. Is this going to be a record year for draft picks for the school?
I hope so, man. That would be pretty sweet to see. I think Cameron Thomas could easily be, a top 65, top 70 player in this class. His brother, Zachary Thomas, is a really good run blocking offensive tackle. You have Bill Dunkel, another offensive lineman there at San Diego State. I think it's Chance Bell or Greg Bell, the running back from San Diego State, Matt Ariza. We have some talent. I don't know. We had like a previous draft class where we had DeMonte Casey, Rashad Penny, Nico Siragusa. Maybe it's not a record year, but I think it will be a pretty good one.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, if you got a chance of getting a punter drafted, that's going to help the school, right? So, in terms of some of the positions with just predominantly the defensive side of the ball, in terms of kind of cover 2, cover 3 safeties that kind of reverted in and out those kind of formations last year under Lovie Smith. In terms of safety class, is there any of these guys that you think of? What do you think of the position group as a whole?
Yeah, I like the safety class a lot, like starting at pick 25, right? I don't think Kyle Hamilton, I think, is a phenomenal player, but when you get to where the Houston Texans will be picking a little bit in the second round or day 2, it's more looking at guys like Jaquan Brisker, Penn State, Lewis Cine of Georgia, Jalen Petrie, Baylor, Nick Cross of Maryland. I think is a vastly underrated player in this class. I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of those like surprises at the back end of the first that's not being consistently mocked in that range. He's got really good range. He's got really good speed. I think Nick Cross of Maryland is one of my guys as well. And then you didn't even bring up Kirby Joseph, who I think has interesting length. Daxton Hill, Michigan, is another interesting player. So I think it's a really good safety class that like I said, I think you can get starters at that position on day 2.
Yeah, and Kirby Joseph, big ties to Lovie Smith being at Illinois, so it could be and a lot of ball production as well, particularly in his final year. So I think he's a name definitely to watch out. And it's definitely been talked about edge as being the deepest position in this class. Is there guys you can see into sort of kind of late day 2 that could be the next sort of Max Crosby, those kind of mid-round guys that that kind of find production that completely outweighs their draft slate?
Maybe not an edge. I think a lot of the talented edge defenders will be taken early in this year's draft. But interior offensive line is where I see some of that, right? Arian Kennard, Kentucky offensive tackle, if he plays guard, I think he can start right away. I really like Tyler Smith of Tulsa. Now, he might even go in first round. I mean, I think he's got really good tools to do so. Abraham Lucas, Washington State, I think is a talented offensive lineman. Cole Strange, Chattanooga, Luke Fortner, Kentucky. There's a lot of starters. Like I said, at some of these low-value positions, safety, off-ball linebacker, and interior offensive line, go get yourself a starter on day 2. And, some of these interior offensive line prospects, safety prospects, and off-ball linebackers like Chad Muma, Wyoming, Darian Beavers, Cincinnati, Brandon Smith, Penn State, Christian Harris, Alabama. These are all like really good off-ball linebacker prospects that no one's sprinting to put the card in the first round for these guys. But if you're taking them in the second and third round, whereas at receiver, edge, or corner, you're probably not getting a starter, I think you're getting a starter at those positions.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think a position we really need to kind of find a way at and build an identity in the secondary. In terms of corners and predominantly through predominantly zone looks, is there guys here that you think could offer value in zone schemes?
Yeah, I mean, in the first round, I like McDuffie, I like Carl Gordon. I think those guys in zone schemes will have a lot of success. If that could be, if Gordon falls to the second round, which I think there's a chance he could. I think he's a really interesting athlete. I think he's had a sub-4 second short shuttle, really fast 3-cone. That change of direction is something I would want to buy into. After that, Petrie is a slot cornerback type that I really like. Roger McCreary, another one, probably not fit in his zone. He even said at the Senior Bowl, right? He's like, I never played really zone. I want to play a lot of man coverage in the NFL. I think he's a better fit for man-heavy schemes. But in terms of zone cornerbacks, Zion McCullum, is someone I think I would invest in as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of when you look back on last year's kind of evaluation of the class, Davis Mills obviously getting picked up in the third round. We've had all the kind of turmoil of the Deshaun Watson situation. When you look back on the evaluation that you had on Mills, how does that kind of match up to how he's kind of progressed in the pros?
Yeah, he's definitely exceeded expectations, right? I don't think anyone expected him to have such early success last year, especially when you compare it to Trevor Lawrence and his slow start and Zach Wilson not having the best start to the season. And Mac Jones was really the most impressive rookie quarterback, and he wasn't even, he's the 5th player taken. So Davis Mills, am I hitching my wagon to him like the Giants have with Daniel Jones? Probably not, but I am obviously interested in seeing another year while this isn't a really good quarterback class. I think if there were better quarterback prospects in this class, if you were looking or staring in the face of CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, or, a Will Levis, I think there could be different conversation for Houston this year, and they're not as eager to play Davis Mills another season. But I think when you look at how they approach free agency, right, a lot of short-term deals, they're not looking to make like big splashes yet. I think they know that they're still very much in the heat of a rebuild. They're not looking to like take aggressive steps like the Bengals did, right? Bengals had 4 offensive linemen this free agency, so much that they can improve at all these different spots because they know they're in a window right now with obviously a really talented young quarterback. Yeah,
absolutely. And in terms of kind of building around the young quarterback, is there certain steps you think that we can learn from kind of, obviously Jamar Chase being the big one last year, but is there certain steps you think you can take from the draft and take players at certain spots that can help develop them? Is it as simple as putting weapons around them and guys that can stand up, or is it more nuanced than that?
I really do think it's that simple, right? But I also think at certain positions, it's getting better in talent. I think their offensive line needs to improve. The receiving core, I think you can add youth. I think at 13, they could consider receiver, depending if Drake London, Chris Olave, whoever may be there, Garrett Wilson, another option as well. But just throw the kitchen sink at resource on offense, because it's out after Brandon Cooks and Laramie Tunsil, there's just not a ton of talent there, right? There's not a ton of talent on that roster from a receiving core perspective.
Yeah, and in terms of how you see kind of night one or any kind of the theories and how you see the draft going this year, have you got any kind of working theories or paradigms you think you can impart on us, or the way you see it going?
Yeah, I do think that Trayvon Walker is going to go high, right? Yeah. I think he goes as high as 1. I think he could be the number 1 overall pick. I think he could go to the Detroit Lions at 2. Houston will consider him at 3. And if they do, it's interesting for them to pass on one of these blue chip offensive tackle prospects. I think right now, Ike Ekwonu is minus 115 to be picked inside the top 3. And we know the Detroit Lions are going to take him at 2 with Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker there. So I do think that, what could ultimately happen is Trayvon Walker goes higher than people think. Cross falls a bit further than people think. And then Derek Stingley Jr., I think, is now a lock to go inside the top 12, when sometimes we've seen him fall a bit further than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And draft night, are you any traditions, or are you just working flat out? Or the whole weekend?
out, man. I wish I would. The only tradition is work, right? I don't think there's a lot of other things you can do outside of that.
And you've got a series coming up with Aiden Hutchinson, is that right? And you got some other stuff going on at PFF.
Yep, definitely. Check out the Hutch podcast. It's you can find it wherever you find your podcasts. It's a 4-part podcast series that comes out, I think, in like 5 hours, dude. It comes out Wednesday, April 13th, which we're really excited to release. And then you can check out all my work on PFF.com. Twitter is PFF_Austin Gayle. And then you can check my podcast out, Tailgate, wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, that's great, Austin. Thank you very much for your time again this year. Great to speak to you. You're a busy man, being on NFL Network and everything. So thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.